All right, so we're the last one before your final panel, or your final award. So anyway, my name is Colleen Gallagher. I was in the Education 2.0, but I do run an online marketing education company. So even though it's through education, I grew it so quickly because of marketing. So I'm excited to be here. But we'll just start off with each of us introducing ourselves and who you are if you guys haven't met or known, and then how I've run some of the panels that I've been on before that worked really well is we have some questions that we each asked, so I'll just ask you each a question, and then if you guys want some dialogue after someone answers, we're happy to do that. You wanna start?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Colleen. I appreciate being here. Thank you guys all. My name is Carolina Torrens. I'm the CEO and co-founder of influencer agency 5 Years Apart.
My name is Ryan, and I am CEO of OneSource Branding and Media, and we focus on content creation as well as the future of internet with Web3 primarily.
My name is Leslie Martinez, and I am the founder of Dijon Design Studios as well as a managing partner for Slick Agency, and we focus on aligning brand narratives, optimizing audience positioning.
Awesome. And as we said, my name is Colleen Gallagher, and I own an online education and coaching company. And so anyway, Caroline, we have their first question. What are some of the ways brands can effectively incorporate influencers and creators in their brand communication strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Colleen. So I think the very nature of influencer makes them an incredibly effective brand communication piece of your brand communication strategy, I should say. And there are two things that are really valuable about influencers, and leveraging those properly is really what makes them an effective, piece of your brand communication strategy. And those pieces are, they're very in tune with the zeitgeist of the audience that, is paying attention to them. So they know the trends that they're looking at, they know what's relevant to keep up with, and they know how to communicate that effectively in a way that really resonates with the audience that they're sort of catering to. So it's a really great way to get directly to the market that you're looking to and to speak to them in a way that's very clear and that they really resonate with. So leveraging that is kind of, piece number one. And then piece number two is a really great influencer creator will communicate the brand message that you dictate, by way of brief and whatever it is that you're trying to communicate to your audience as a brand, but they do that in a voice that's very authentic and very true to them. So you have a very reliable sort of social proof piece of content to speak to your brand and what sort of messaging you're trying to put out there. So, so social proof ads are really, really effective paid advertisements. So, influencer can be really complementary to other pieces of your brand communication strategy as well. And the very nature of working with those kinds of people really leads way to very effective brand communication methods.
Awesome, and I really like that, and I definitely agree it's so important to find the right people that share authentically because it really just expands the network, so it's really important. So Ryan, how do businesses use social media?
Well, we take a unique approach. We basically believe content is king, and consistency is very important for us. So all of the clients that we manage, we post a minimum of 5 times per day on platforms. And so we also try to focus on shareable content, so not always just promoting the service of the business, but creating resources, things around their local community that will help their community share their content even more. And then obviously TikTok is very huge for us right now. I personally believe that for price and reach, TikTok is definitely the king right now. So making sure all of our clients are utilizing every social media platform, posting consistently rather than once or twice a month, again, minimum of 5 times a week, and utilizing all platforms, but focusing on platforms that will bring the most attention and value to their brand.
I love that. Something that I actually heard, it was in my PhD program, is content is king, design is queen. And I always like that. So I think it's important to say because it is really true to have both of them, and it kind of speaks to what you were sharing. So, Leslie, how do you align brand narratives with marketing objectives? And sorry, before you start, I'm not texting you guys, I'm just reading from here, so no one thinks. Here you go.
It's actually, I kind of get at the crux of issues of the problem, conversion. So a lot of times when I am brought into a space, we have, an established brand whose content, they're doing what they think is the right thing to do. They're creating content. It's funny, it's this, it's that. But what's happening is that it's not converting the way that they think it should. And oftentimes, it's really about sharpening the brand narrative to speak specifically to an audience, a niche audience, in a way that has emotional, compelling, it's emotionally compelling. So really it's about, starting sort of with, especially product-specific audiences. So not everything your company does is for everyone. And so there shouldn't be a carte blanche approach to content creation. It needs to, and that's where just understanding the product and all the nuances of the product, breaking down, what sectors or what variances of the sectors. So even by region, the content that you create in New York, the content that you create in Atlanta is not the content you create in Chicago. So there's, very hyper-local contexts to narratives that brands need to be more sensitive to. You can't just sort of do a national campaign and expect the same results. So that's kind of what I do. I come in and I workshop, clarify a lot of things, get into the nitty-gritty, and then from there we have a content development strategy that's more effective.
I love that. And I think it's so important, too, to look at, just not even just nationally, but globally, because the communication on social media goes everywhere. So the question I had is, what is brand communication? So I think this is such an interesting one, and especially when I was just in Education 2.0, but I always believe whatever organization you're in, right, or even if you own your own company, you are a living, walking organism of that brand, right? And so if you're not believing in what organization you live or work for, or live with or collaborate with, there has to be a part of you that's embodied in it, right? I mean, I'm the owner of Colleen Gallagher International, so I'm my brand, but I can tell you every one of my team members, they look similar. Like feature-wise, but they have a very unique self-expression way. They're into New Age spirituality, they're into yoga, they're into health, they went through some type of trauma. Like the story is very similar in each person. And so you want to make sure with brand communication, what is it your company brings and what are you allowing people to express or experience through you? And brand communication is when someone can just look at you, they meet you, and they go, we're part of the same tribe. Even if I don't know what you do, I don't know what it is, but we're part of it. And that then builds a connection or relationship for you to connect via social media, email list, whatever, to then keep growing. And that is really the essence of brand communication. And what's important in a lot of what you guys were saying as well is you want to make sure, like, example with Education 2.0, there's people all over the demographic of how they connect, email, LinkedIn, social media, whatever. And I only had one way, right? I'd be losing a huge portion of people. And so you want to make sure your brand communication, there's always a way to plug into you on what is convenient for the different demographics and different ways that your client would like to do that on their time. And that's when you start really, advancing your brand communication. Do you guys have any questions on that first round? I know we're at the end of the day. We're all super excited. Any questions on that at all? Okay, so we're gonna go back. We'll do it this way now. Or we start with Ryan. You're the only guy. Okay, so how do businesses utilize the growth of Web3?
That's something that's coming that I don't think anyone's really paying the amount of attention to that they should be. It's inevitable that Web3 is coming, and the impact and the change on the internet, I believe that that's going to have for everyone, let alone businesses, is going to be pretty drastic. And so for us, it's at that stage where it still seems very new and there's still not a lot of understanding of how to utilize it. So we just try to focus on educating our clients and our brands as much as possible what the changes of Web3 is going to be and what that means, because it will drastically change everything from social media to the way that you advertise to the way that we engage and shop on the internet. And so right now, where it's not really a definite on when Web3 will take over Web2, it's very important that businesses start really planning. They spoke the first day a little bit about NFTs and stuff like that that's a part of Web3, but I think businesses really looking at how they can incorporate NFTs and blockchain technology into their business is going to be extremely important to even survive in the future with the direction that everything's going.
Yeah, and I actually just saw too, I don't know if, I'm assuming many of you use Zoom or somehow are connected to Zoom, but they just had a free training, I think it was last week or this week, Tuesday, on Web 3.0 and how they're going to be adding that dimension. Obviously, they don't have the glasses or something yet, but how we have characters so we'd feel like we're in the room. So it's definitely going to be a lot of the platforms we use as marketers. We'll continue to see that and kind of probably being looked at as trusted advisors for a lot of people of what is this after it's a field of not really knowing a lot of the marketing in the digital world. So I totally agree. Does anyone have any questions on that one? I know that's kind of like a complex thing, and we're all just super pumped. Okay, so we're gonna go to Leslie. How do you approach content marketing for your clients and differentiate them in the market?
Yeah, so the differentiation, there's a lot of common narratives, common approaches, it's, nothing new is under the sun, right? It's just really how you embody your understanding, encapsulate that, and speak to the right people. So really it's, I think the user-generated content is probably the most effective when you're talking about a product. Let's say, the way that your customer speaks about your product is worth more than how you speak about your product. And I think it kind of cuts through the noise in a consumer market from brands pumping themselves up and telling their own story versus their user base telling the story for them. So I think user-generated content is kind of the way to go from my approach. The other things like the brand ambassadors, affiliate marketing still is effective for those who are passionate. Like affiliate marketing, where the affiliate is actually creating content while they're, let's say, at an event. That's shown like really, really effective as well. So kind of getting that energy tapped into the fact that they're making some money, plus user-generated content, they're actually really more effective than what I've seen is like even internal sales teams.
Yeah, and Ryan too, you might want to speak on it because you do a lot of content as well. So what would you say between like an organization hiring someone to do content and then you actually having to adapt to the organization's content? Like what have you seen with that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously to create content the way that it should be, it's demanding, right? So it's very challenging, I think, for businesses to execute the way that they would need to without hiring outside help. But it is also very important that if you are an agency, obviously understanding the business, understanding their goals plays a huge role into what type of content you're gonna put out based around their services. But then also, like I said, mixing it in with content that's also just shareable content and not always directly pointing at their services is also important. So just really it comes down to understanding the client, the account, what their goals are, what their objectives are, and making sure that they're executing content and social media the way that it needs to be.
Yeah, I love that. And I definitely have seen the power in that. I know someone on my team, they just implement, like every week we share a story, and if they comment or share a post, we give them a free book or one of my free products. So it's definitely a good way to grow that. So I totally can see that, and it's been great in our business. So Carolina, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of utilizing influencers in your brand communication strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I actually think that it plays a lot with some of what we've been talking about here. But I think by way of advantage, it's constant content creation. You can rely on other people to be bringing in very high value content on a regular basis, which content creation, it's not only difficult and sort of a heavy lift by way of trying to get it out there and get it looking right, but it's also expensive. If you go to an agency or directly to an artist, really, it doesn't matter any way you slice it. It's not free to produce content unless you're doing it yourself, especially great content, So I would call that an advantage for sure. I would say a disadvantage that might even be sort of moved into an advantage, if I might be so bold to say, is that you're really, we've talked about how important, many of us on this panel have talked about how important it is to relay the right message and relay a consistent message as it relates to your brand, and you are relinquishing that message to somebody else to kind of run with. So the disadvantage that is the sort of reach or liability that you're extending yourself to by putting into somebody else's hands the burden or the honor, maybe we should call it, of relaying your brand message for you is of course a risk, like it is with anything else. But again, I would spin that on its head and say that that's actually an advantage because you're getting really authentic content from people that act as social proof, UGC, user-generated content. Whether or not you had sort of planted the seeds to get that user-generated content is nobody's business, but whatever it takes to get people really authentically and honestly talking about your product in a way that you want to put it out there. So I think that creators are really a great way to do that at mass and in a way that's really high quality, but with a relative amount of risk, like any other paid marketing effort is really. And I would say the best way to mitigate those risks, do your research, go audience first when you're picking your creators. Really make sure that they know what they're talking about, that they have a great engagement rate, and that the people that are listening to them are really tuned in, because what they're saying is not only genuine, but is being said in a way that really resonates with who they're talking to.
Yeah, I really agree with all that. And I think that's a great way to classify. Do you have something you want to say?
I was going to piggyback a little bit
Please,
on
yeah, absolutely.
the negative PR. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
So yeah, I've come into that space where, brands are, obviously when they get to a certain size, sometimes there's a disconnect when it comes to audience and audience perspective. So if you have creative teams creating things, putting it out there that's rubbing an audience the wrong way is probably the worst. It's a creator's nightmare, a marketing department's nightmare, excuse me. And so how do we transform that, I think, is certainly like where the fear of negative press comes in. The honesty is always like number one for me when it comes to strategy. Being honest about the fact that, we made a mistake. It's probably the best PR strategy is to come out and either, admit that there were gaps or things that fell short during the creation process, and then immediately action. People, the audience want action. They want their trust to be earned, and so doing that's content, right? You create some more content to showcase the fact that you are proactive around learning and getting better, especially if you're even just talking about like the diversity and inclusion conversation where culturally things might not be gelling, and that you are showcasing that you're getting training, or that your team and everyone is sort of leaning in around this education. That's how you rectify those types of things, and I think that's something to think about, and that's how you turn a negative into a positive.
Yeah. And then the last question I had, the question I had for myself is how to build trust quicker for quicker buying periods in brand communication. I think this was something that, like, when I first started in the online space 4 years ago, you're like, I want them to buy right now. Like, how do I do this? And, now I've had my brand, I've showed up consistently for every day for 4 years, or repurposed content. I have multiple books, multiple products. There's different social proof. I've done all these things. So when I post something, it's much a quicker buying period for me to post and then someone to buy that I've never heard of, right? There's a guy actually today from Saudi Arabia, I think it was. He has a $10 million brand, and he does e-commerce, and he reached out and was like, I've been a huge fan of yours for years. I followed you, and he bought one of my books and one of my courses for the first time, and I was like, oh my God. And so with brand communication, right, how do you quicken that? The more that you show up and it's the same message, you're around the same thing, it's not like you're going AWOL onto some topic that, you've never discussed, or even if you are, let's say, like, there's things that I've talked about, like, that haven't maybe made sense in my brand of, like, returning to love or health or wellness or manifestation. Like, I've talked about the Britney Spears or legal things or my PhD, but I always make it return to love. Like, you can always turn the story to what your mission is. And I think that's really important. And I also think it's important in team meetings, even, like, to make sure that whatever you're doing, it's internal and external, the same thing of, like, why are we having this meeting? It's because maybe or this post, why is this going? Because I feel a desire to express, or I feel a desire for communication. And from that, it's gonna let the right people see. And just because someone's not engaging or they're not, like, commenting, there's always more people watching you that are gonna buy from you than you know. And that's a fact. Like, I can see, like, just in my, my 4 years, like, the increase in one post, like, what that percentage would be. And I can't even imagine, what would be 10 years. So I think as an organization, I think a lot of you said great things, is like, when you first start, I did it myself, but I think starting internal with your organization, and then once it grows so big, you will hire something external normally, but you already have a full internal system of how that will work, so you could afford the budget. But it's a no-brainer of once you start, it really does become like an automated system you can use for new product launches, new service launches, reservice launches to make sure people still know reblogs, collaborations. There's so much you can do. And so it is just that consistency and always returning to whatever your pillars are, your values are, to really close the gap on trust. So do you guys have anything else you want to say? Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Because we have about 27 minutes left.
This could be the most effective panel ever also, is the other way to spin that on its head. Brand communication method, positives.
So, but anything at all? I know this is a long days. Were you guys happy, sad? Who's going? Are you guys ready to get a drink? Why can we get something?
I think there could be something said just to differentiate the types of brands. I think that's also just a little extra meat. So yeah, the approach of brand development for a personal brand is certainly a different conversation, a different process for let's say an umbrella brand, a holding company, or a niche brand, something that's just speaking to let's say one product. It's certainly about the vision of the entrepreneur, and I am saying that specifically because that's really where a lot of my work is, for the small to mid-sized business whose founder has, braved the storms and, has done a really good job, but it's just like getting a cap on their success, like what's next, or maybe they've grown organically, and then we're just like, all the numbers are dropping, like something's wrong. So that's kind of the process that I walk founders, entrepreneurs, teams through is getting that brand architecture back in alignment with aesthetic, back in alignment with audience, back in alignment with their core values. That's a process. So anyway, just thinking about who you are as a business owner, and maybe I'm assuming a lot of you are business owners. If something's not working, you got to do the work to realign it, because as soon as you get that, the energy is back. And I don't know, I've just seen so much growth from that process, and I just kind of encourage. Any other thoughts?
I think one thing, I said this earlier, and again, I don't know this room as much because I wasn't in this room the whole time, but I think one thing is if you feel bored with what you're doing on social media, the reader is going to be bored. If you don't feel excited, and if you have something in your mind, it's almost in the same way, if each of you probably can relate to this, when you want to text a friend something, be oh, I don't want to seem weird if that's weird or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. You guys have all had this happen. The same thing you should begin thinking of social media. I have something I want to share, but that's weird to share. That's the thing you need to be sharing. Even if it's an organization, it has to be right in that moment, but that still should be what's in the pipeline to be shared, or that's still the thing that's there. And whenever you share that with the friend that you're should I do this? Should I not do this? And they're that was so brilliant, or that was so funny. I'm so happy you said that, or whatever. Social media is the same. It's a relationship, but it's your relationship to an interweb of real people, really. It's just another way of dialogue, conversation, connection. It's not really any different than us sitting right here, except there's this digital thing, but when you put the right thing, it just attracts to you. So it's a much more balanced system of building a community instead of having to knock on a door and drag someone in, which is not good or bad. You could still knock on someone's door and do that, but it's just a way more accessibility to freedom. And what you said too is, yeah, I have a personal brand, and so yes, but even if you have an organization, right, I have 8 different products, physical products, 25 online courses that I've designed, created, sold. So in a way, I do have an umbrella that I've done with all these different things. I can mix and max and cross-sell and upsell and downsell, and I do all these things. But you have to just feel excited. And once you do that, even if it's an organization, your right people are. Even this is an engineering. I had a bee farmer, and I knew nothing about bees, and he wanted to get into more farmers markets. I taught him some social media strategies. Within the first 8 weeks, he was in 12 new different farmers market for his distribution, all because of how he talked about bees and his things. I don't know anything about this, but there's a lot of people that are excited about bees and honey. Let me tell you that. And this is how you want to think about it in a way to make it more effective. So, but piggyback either.
Yeah, I think not overthinking content is huge. you know, like you said, sometimes just putting it out there is the main thing that you need to do. And I think a lot of people, we tend to overthink content. And sometimes it's the one that you do not think you should post that may be the one that hits, you know. And another thing, too, with video content, obviously, you know, now with TikTok and Instagram saying that they're not a photo sharing app now, video's huge. And I think that intimidates a lot of brands and business owners and people that are trying to get started too, because you think you have to have a big production, you've got to have all of these cameras, without realizing that that phone is just powerful and all you have to do is hit record. You don't need the crazy editing. You don't need you don't need to start with everything that you can grow to, but just getting the content, putting it out there, not overthinking it, just sharing an entire journey or everything about a business or everything you're going through. And you never know which one will hit, and it's going to come through consistency and not overthinking it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that authenticity piece, and people love to see, people are struggling, you know, people have their own things every single day, either in work or outside of, so I think people really appreciate to that authenticity piece, and it's, yeah, I would say that it's really a hurdle that you have to get over, that your content has to be perfect. You're much better off just getting started, and you can perfect as you move along and learn as you move along and hear what people take to, and yeah, I couldn't agree with you guys more.
Yeah, there's a guy, Josh Snow, if you've never heard about him, he's a great guy. Yeah, to photograph, he makes, I don't know, like, he can make like $1 million in a weekend anytime basically he wants. He's a phenomenal marketer. Met the guy too, really stand-up guy. And he, even at his level, the people he's playing with, he's like literally your most authentic one. Like he's like, I've spent hundreds of thousands on this perfect video. No one buys. He's like, and then I literally do this thing and it's like everyone buys. And so it's again this thing of like just, it is like a test in a way. Like, I don't know, if you think of your first product, like, right, when you first do something, you're very rarely, if you're making a product, going to put the first thing to the public, right? Like, or the first thing that goes, and that's going to, maybe, but not really, right? And it's the same way with marketing or social media. Like, it's a constant up and go. And like my first video I ever did on YouTube, it's still on there on Facebook. It was like, I just want to spread some love in the world. And like, I'm this little girl, I mean, not little, but like a 24-year-old woman. I'm 28 now, but like sitting there and doing that. And that still has like so many views, and people are like, oh, she's always, I'm like, here's the proof that it was not like that. And you can just use it as that. And it becomes, you asset it in a different way, but it's like this moving asset for you in a way. So I think that's what's really important too. So, any questions? We kind of. All right. Well, you guys, you were a great audience. Loved it. I know we're at the end, pushing through. If there's, I was like, if there's nothing left or nothing, we can give you 19 minutes and 57 seconds back of your life.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.